Are we ready to go? We are ready to go. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Port of Kennewick Commission to order. Good evening and welcome to all of you. I was told to hold it close to me, but I don't think that's necessarily a good idea. But my name is Tom Moak. I am the president of the Port Commission tonight. And with me are my fellow Port Commissioners, Skip Novakovich and Don Barnes. And we're here with you for this very special meeting on Vista Field. And I'd like to thank all of you for being here. We're going to combine some formal elements tonight because this is an official public meeting of the Port Commission, and we'll have some informal parts to it, including the fact that some of you are standing, including some of you are standing by the refreshments. And that is picking the right place. So one of the formal elements that we are going to utilize is the pledge to the flag. Would you stand and join with me in the pledge to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So one of the more informal things I'm going to do is take off my tie. And I'll take off the coat. And because this is Kennewick, yeah, that is enough. But this is a special meeting really to share some exciting plans with you about Vista Field. And on this first nice day of spring, we see all these people who are here inside. It makes me feel good. I think it makes the Port Commission feel good to be here. And to see so many people who care about what is happening in our community. We have a number of port staff who are here, and they're going to be here to help you. They're going to be speaking, some of them. If you're a port staff member, would you just either stand or raise your hand so people know that you are some of the people who are going to be important? And so if you have questions of what's going on or need help with the food and taste testing, please talk to one of our staff people. We're also here today to thank City of Kennewick, who's been with us as a partner for these number of years and worked through a lot of the details of this Vista Field plan. And some of the folks with the City of Kennewick probably know this plan as well as the Port of Kennewick. And as we go forward, it's really important to thank our City of Kennewick. And we have Police Chief Ken Hohenberg, who's here back by the donuts, I suppose. Cookies. And we appreciate Ken and Marie Mosley and all the staff and the City Council for their support as we have gone through here. We've also had a great architect group, DPZ, out of Miami, Florida, who has been part of the vision of this whole Vista Field plan for the last 5 years, and we're really grateful for them. So, we're going to do some presentations by our staff tonight. We're going to have opportunities to look at some renderings. And the most important part, public is going to have opportunities to speak. We're not going to limit you to any particular time period. We just want you to be mindful of everybody might want to talk. And if you have things to say, we want you to be able to say them. You'll direct your comments here to the chair, and we hope that if there are questions and there are comments and whatever, that appropriate staff or commission members will address those. We want this to be sort of free-flowing and be able to talk, but everybody has to talk into a microphone, and we're going to have several microphones around here. You'll have to state your name and address for the record, just because this is a formal public meeting. But we do want people to speak and talk, and we're going to be here as commission, and we'll probably will speak too because we all have opinions just as well as you do. And I haven't been able to get these other two to not have anything to say about Vista Field for the last 5 years. That's all I think that I'm going to say right now from the chair's position, because I'd like to turn it over right now to our CEO, Tim Arnson, who's going to sort of lead us through what we're going to look at tonight.
My name is Tim Arnson. I'm CEO of the Port of Kennewick, and it's my pleasure to serve the Port Commission, who serves the public. And it's really, it's nice to see so many friendly faces in the room tonight. So one of the things I want to do is kind of roll through my part of it as quickly as possible, because, I think what we really want to do is get into the sketches so you can see what we're going to be building. And, there's a lot of people here. Some have chairs, some don't. So I'm going to try to roll through this. I guess I'm going to talk to you about 4 things tonight. One are the sketches that you're going to see, and I want to emphasize 2 things about them. They're conceptual, meaning that we shouldn't go up and point to a building and say, aha, is that right where that building's going to go, and is it going to be this big, is it going to have a flat roof, and X, Y, and Z. The answer to that will be no, that these things are meant to show you kind of the overall layout, and to show you that, with example, that building, yes, there's probably going to be a building here. It might be about this size. So keep in mind conceptual. The other thing, and I thought about this over the last few days, I like the term sketches because that's what you're going to see here. And these sketches represent a very skilled artist of translating everything that this community has passed on to that artist through the port staff and commission. So sketches, that's another word that I like. And as you see some of these sketches, I think there's a lot of excitement embodied in that. But remember one thing. These sketches have captured what the public, what you folks have told us through this multi-year planning process. And it has been quite a while from the start when the commission had a public process to determine what to do with the airport. Do we keep it as an airport? Do we close it? And then once that decision was made, then they interacted with the public on, okay, what is it that we want to build? So what you see tonight, hopefully when you look at these pictures, these sketches, you recognize it, because this isn't what I thought we should build or what Commissioner Moak thought we should build. It's what you told us that you wanted. So there's excitement on my part because now you get to see the translation of all of the thoughts and input from the public onto these sketches. Then as we get a little bit further into the evening, Nick, my CFO, is going to talk to you a little bit about financing of this project, and I will help him with that or assist him. He probably doesn't need any of my help. But we're going to talk to you a little bit about the financing part of it. And then a little bit later in the evening, I'll try to talk to you about what we anticipate as a project schedule. It's still a little bit dicey because once we conclude this evening's activities and we take the plans, put the finishing touches on them, then we turn them into the city that has to do final review. So there's a few things out of our hands. When I talk to you about a schedule, I'm going to talk to you about if we have a reasonable path forward, here's what we think the schedule will be. And then finally, I want to talk to you about private sector involvement, because we've been hearing a lot from the builders, the folks that want to buy a piece of property in there, when is it going to be time to talk about us coming in and assisting. So I want to talk a little bit about how the private sector might be looking forward to these plans. So I think that's what I've got for now. I do want to make one other comment. Tonight's meeting is going to be a little bit unscripted, might even be a little bit messy, because this isn't a typical meeting for governments. Typically, governments work off of an agenda. They have public comment at the front of the meeting, and then they go do all their business, and they might have public comment at the back of the meeting. This meeting is really built around kind of a different model, unscripted, where the big part of the meeting is going to be you folks walking around the room, maybe grabbing one of the handheld mics and having a chance to participate that way. So it's going to be a little bit unscripted, but you know what? It's going to be real. It's going to be government in action, and it's going to be real. So I will turn it back over to Commissioner Moak. Thank you for this opportunity.
Important part of the presentation from staff is now going to be from our port planning director, who's going to go through some of these sketches that we have here and sort of explain some of those, and then we'll let you do a little bit more looking at them yourself. But Larry, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Larry Peterson. I'm the Director of Planning and Development for the Port of Kennewick. I see many familiar faces and some new faces, so welcome. This will not be a run-through from the beginning of Vista Field's history. I'm going to presume that you're here in the room, so you're up to speed on the redevelopment. So we're going to pick this up and get pretty quickly to the actual sketches. One thing I just want to remind, and Tim was touched on this, these are renderings in this conceptual. This conveys the ideas and the concepts involved, but the specific detail, will the building look exactly of that roof pitch or of that siding? Likely no, but this is, you'll get some ideas that this is significantly different than what we have in this community in terms of development and places to live, work, and play. There are one other little note I want to get. When you see green on the screen for a site depicted, that doesn't mean grass. That means public space, and in many cases, these are urban in nature. So think of these as more urban hardscape. And there's a few of the renderings, we actually had to pull some of the trees out. If we put all the trees and vegetation in, you wouldn't be able to see the buildings in behind. So there's going to be more vegetation throughout the project. I'm going to be brief, and for me that knows that, that's a challenge. This, leaving the charrette, this was the layout that was last shown on the screen that Saturday night. That was the efforts of all the citizens coming together, working with DPZ, and had the idea of not only the interior development, all following the model of new urbanism, connectivity, and a significant mix of uses. It was also an idea that there could be some strong connections made to the existing street network. We worked through that process in a year or so time frame, and one of the things that changed significantly was the off-site. The port focused on the property that we owned and can control, and we're not dependent upon other parties participating in the new urbanism model, and still looked at this at 103 acres can make one heck of a significant place in our community. So this is the layout that was approved in the December 2017 master plan for Vista Field. A little bit of an evolution. This was the core of the project next to the convention center in 2000, in November of the time of the charrette, and now it has evolved. It's still a public space, but we've had a new user move in. Some may remember this slide. During the charrette, this was the concept for the Vista Arts Center. Simply reuse of corporate hangars next to the fixed operator building, which used to be the Visitor and Convention Bureau space, and right out the back door of the building we're in. And that has moved to the core of the project and has morphed from reusing of existing metal buildings into a world-class arts center right in the heart of the project. So there has been, as what happens in the planning process, there's been some evolution, but what hasn't changed is the core principle. This is based upon new urbanism, the idea of walkability, a place for all, and mixing of uses as opposed to the silo of land uses spread throughout the community of single family in one spot, commercial in another. Vista Field, 103-acre site. The 20 acres is the first phase of development. The port is working on the final touches for the construction drawings to open up. The core of the site involves about a 20-acre gross, 2 acres or so in a park, space for approximately 170 residences. That's single-family, detached, small lot, condos, townhome, apartment, and also about 200,000+ square feet of what's called commercial space, but don't think of just commercial being a cash register. That is office, retail, service, and a good chunk of that square footage is allocated for the performing arts facility. But this is a lot of development on a smaller piece of property, different pattern than we have in the Tri-Cities. This is the phase 1 improvements that the Port of Kennewick will be funding. These are the corporate hangars that currently exist on Deschutes. There will be a roadway that passes between those two corporate hangars, making a connection all the way to Grand Ridge Boulevard. There's actually what the Public Works Director termed as the scissors, a X-shaped intersection that connects to Grand Ridge Boulevard. We will be putting in a small segment of the roadways necessary to support the residential oriented segment of the project, and in and around the hangar facilities, we will be opening up an area for what's called pop-up retail. Think food trucks and some specialty vendors and special event activity. We're following the principles that were identified in the charrette. We're being lean. We're trying to reuse as much of the taxi lane as possible, simply restripe it for a parking lot. If it was good enough for an aircraft to drive across, it's good enough for vehicular parking. We're also talking about a water feature that runs from the hangar buildings along the main spine of the roadway into a park, future park setting and a pond. This looks it's just a skeleton. When you put the meat on it of the private sector, this is what the port would fund. This would open up the private sector being able to take advantage and come off of those roadways and construct their buildings as we put the infrastructure, the water, the sewer, the street lights, the communication, the fiber, and some of the backbone elements that help build this place of the water and the landscaping. This allows for the build out of this first phase. The largest building that you see in here this depicts the 800-seat Vista Arts Center, the privately funded facility. By the way, you can talk to those folks out back. They'll take check, cash, or charge, I believe. It also opens up areas that are primarily oriented for residential, but this isn't to read as single-family homes. This is what's called that missing middle. In this community, we have single-family detached homes, and we have apartments. This is a location where some courtyard apartments, 4 and 6 units in a space, even some of the cottage homes, the smaller square footage of 600 to 800 to 1,000 square feet, all in this narrower street network where walkability, not precluding the cars, just not the primary design element is not automotive driven. It's a balance, not an exclusion, but simply a balance with vehicles. And a primarily oriented commercial restaurant type orientation off of the water feature and a second fountain that would be located. This is the thought to be the first location to build off of what the remodel happens in these hangars that might be hospitality related, that then could work into this area in and around this public space, in and around the water feature. To be thinking of that as your public gathering space. This is that restaurant that's right outside from the water feature where you can get your meal and be right by the edge of the water. The water feature during the EIS process was almost contemplated to be the canal system in San Antonio or in Indianapolis, and the water feature that we have in place or proposed now is more in scale for this project, and we're talking of a stream with a babbling brook and noise throughout and constant water moving that draws 3 different pedestrian bridges crossing this stream along with a vehicular and pedestrian bridge, multiple ways to get across the water, and even some steps down into the water so people can get down and in and across the water. The depth of this water feature is somewhere between 8 and 16 inches, so it's not something to be swept away, but it's something to enjoy. Speaking of the Vista Arts Center, this would be a view almost from the building that we're in, looking to the southeast across the site towards what would be the UPS facility. And this is to depict the pond, which would be the end of the water feature. The public space, again, green doesn't mean grass. Think of this or have this read as public open space, likely hardscape. This is that gathering place. This is that farmer's market on a Saturday. This is the event and festival location. Behind that is the performing arts facility and a series of, and this is the concept throughout the new urbanism, what's called liner buildings. Hide the parking rather than see that from the street. Use buildings to line the streets to create that interesting pedestrian walking environment, yet the cars are only 150 feet away. It's really just flipping the strip commercial in the parking lot, hide those behind, and being mindful about the architecture so we're not giving blank walls to walk by. It's interesting for the citizens. This would be a view from the main road that runs from the hangar building up to Grand Ridge, looking across the water feature into what would be oriented more of the commercial type, and the term is, Dutch word is Woonerf, which means shared residential street, but across this this water feature, looking at this roadway coming through that both pedestrians and cars are allowed on. It's very slow moving. Many of the streets we have in town now, there might be a crosswalk, but do you really feel safe moving across the roadways? The intended design is traffic calming, subtle things that the traffic engineers get involved in, but curves in roadways slow the vehicle down, the slightly narrower roads slow the vehicles down. And we also have the urban design element of what's called the terminated vista. The bend in the road not only slows the vehicle, but gives you something to look at besides 7 stoplights in a row as you could fire a rifle down the center line of the roadways, and that's a significantly different design. Here's a view of what would be the residential-oriented streets, and this would be the areas in behind the future performing art Vista Arts Center and the current UPS industrial site. And we know we have a development that is backing up next to industrial activities, and rather than try to either transition those industrial in or have a bright line, we're working with that. And part of this is the way the buildings are oriented, and we put alleys and we put parking, the garage spaces for these homes would be facing the UPS site. So this is interior of the shared residential street. There's another view of this shared residential street. We have the 20-foot minimum distance necessary for vehicles to pass. It satisfies some requirements for the fire department, but this is a place where to get to your home, each one of these is served by an alley, so your vehicle parks in back, but your guests could drive down this roadway and stop and visit you, and cars could meander through this area and pick up and drop off, but it's not the standard, all the parking is in the front of the house, the garage is in the front of the home. I believe this slide is when we talk about renderings. This is what much of the community, and not just our community, but the last 40 years in the United States, this has been a residential community, trying to show or depict the difference between what we're talking about at Vista Field and what's been done. Yes, these are 2 renderings, but I believe this clearly depicts that Vista Field, what we're talking about in Vista Field is significantly different. Same for the commercial. We have quite a bit of the commercial type development on the ground on the lower slide. This is that contrast and comparison between what we have and what Vista Field could be. And for me, that's brief. We're here to address the questions, and as Commissioner indicated, he'll be asking, but we'll be engaging. So let's hear your input, and we're happy to ask what this is, why that, and what and why and where, and we can get to the when. I'll turn that.
Thank you, Larry. I appreciate very much, and it was difficult for you to condense it down into that amount of time and still give the semblance of what this project really is. So, we thought that people would be able to wander around and take a look at some of these renderings that are behind us, and it's going to be kind of difficult when we're in a situation where there's more people than we have chairs, and but we're grateful to be here in the Bechtel room for this presentation. So this is an opportunity we're going to open for public comment. Also, if you can, you're welcome to go and grab cookies or whatever the beverage of choice is back in the back while we're doing this. We're trying to be informal, but it doesn't move quite as well as we'd all like it to do. And we have architects and consultants that are sort of guarding the cookie table. So, yes, that was you, David. One of them, I see. We do have a couple staff with microphones, and they are where? Right here, there's Amber Hanshay and Bridget Scott who have microphones. And Tim Arnson has been entrusted with a microphone too. So if you wish to speak, if you would raise your hand, we're just going to go through everybody who wants to speak and ask questions, talk, share a point of view, and we'll want to try to address every single one of you who does that. And we have a comment right here? Right here. Yeah, please state your name and address for the record.
Christine. Okay, hold on.
It's
I
Christine.
don't really need a microphone.
No, you do. This is,
Oh. Okay. Here. It's on the bottom. There we go. Got it. Test. There we go.
yes, thank you.
Christine Wheats, River Realty, 3801 South Zentel Way, Kennewick, Washington. My question, comment, when we did the charrettes, we had talked about instead of having red tape, having pink tape. In other words, having a general building code as long as it's defined and a builder could come in as long as it was doing within those parameters. Is that something that, because going through each, 170 permits is going to take a lot of time, and it would be nice because we have taken the time and you guys have done such tremendous work and research. So when we get the green light, that would be fantastic to be able to start building.
Christine, you're correct. There was a lot of discussion of pink tape and trying to reduce the regulations at Vista Field. And Tim or Larry, would you like to comment on some of the work that's been done with the city in that regard?
Sure, I'll take the first stab at it, then perhaps Larry could talk a little bit more to the details. But Christine, one of the things that we did do was sit down with the city of Kennewick, and I really appreciate their willingness to essentially look at everything and say, okay, we can tinker with it. And what we've come up with is different zoning. We've come up with a master plan that provides for a lot of these things that typically were not permitted by the city code. So in general, we did address that, and I got to say that the city of Kennewick has done a wonderful job of folding in all of these elements, not necessarily to your building permit question, but for example, the narrow streets. It sounds really, really easy, except when you get there and you talk to the fire department, they want to make sure that they have room for the fire trucks, which would be important. So a lot of the bigger concepts in the master plan are things that you don't see many cities in the state permitting, but the city of Kennewick tweaked everything that they had, rewrote a bunch of things, and the city council really did a great job making some of these things happen. So I'll turn it over to Larry and see if he can get down a level or two to try to address some of your issues. But yeah, we want it to be friendly to the private sector, to the builders, to the people that want to buy 3 or 4 lots and build some homes, to the people that want to live here. So that is one of the things that we really did learn from DPZ is you have to streamline the process to the extent that you can. We can't just wave the magic wand and then go back to the days of when there are no building permits and, no nothing. So Larry, if you want to add anything.
Oh, he dared invite me to the microphone. All right, Tim did touch on that. The concept behind the pink zone is reducing the red tape, and the predictability for the development community is important. What do they face if you want to build that building, build that home? Working with the city, and the realtors in the room can maybe speak to this. A new zoning or district has been created called the urban mixed use, which applies here and down to the waterfront where there are no setbacks, 5 feet in the rear, no setbacks, no height limitation, no density restriction, parking requirements are reduced to consider that many uses are mixed. Maybe you live in the site and you also walk to the commercial space or the restaurant, the office space. We've also negotiated all of the transportation mitigation. So the developer comes in and wants to build something and the brakes get put on at City Hall of, well, we're not sure whether you need to fix the intersection at Columbia Center Boulevard or not. We've done all that information, or done all that review, and have an agreement for the city for 10 years on what gets fixed when and where that responsibility lies. So we've tried to take as many variables out of the development equation as possible. We've addressed the issues on fire flow. So any site that needs it can have a sprinkler system. But if the building codes don't require it based upon your use or square footage, there's not an arbitrary, well, you just need to have the additional cost of a sprinkler system. So we negotiated and worked through that. So there's many variables that we could nail down and turn those into constants working with the city we've done related to roads, parking, the mix of land use. It's quite broad. Some cities mixed-use ordinances have a requirement that there's a ratio, 80% of one, 20% of another. Which one comes first? This is it could be all the residential rooftops come first and then the commercial can follow. There's not an arbitrary number that says once you get to 20 rooftops, you then need 2,000 square feet of commercial space. So this is allowing the market. How tall can the market support? How many units on the site can it support? Still need to have parking. One of the other last items that we were able to negotiate, you're getting credit for on-street parking. That's important when you hit it's there. You might as well be able to use it and get credit for that. But the concern about, well, is there enough parking in Vista Field? Again, think of that. It's the idea of we're simply taking the sea of parking and putting it behind the buildings and giving an interesting streetscape for the folks. You're not significantly reducing the overall sea of parking, but there is some intention. We don't want to create massive seas of parking lots. We're breaking those up into smaller pieces, and it's supposed to be adequate and ample, but not excessive, because an excessive parking lot just lends itself to infrequent use and to extra vehicles. So we want to be able to meet the need without having extra space dedicated to parking, which doesn't lend to the vibrancy. So city rewrote every rule they had on the books that relates to roads, land use, and some of that we've now nailed down the process. So I do want to thank the city. We have Greg McCormick, the Community Development Director for the city, in the room, and that was 2.5 years. At first, the port saying, can we have these things? And then at the end, it became this collaborative process where, hey, Larry, you really need to ask for this, and what about this idea? And it was a mix, not just a port requesting from the city, but the city saying, I've seen this, and you need to also think about this item. So they authored the ordinance. We made some comments, but they authored these changes. So we've worked as far as we can, but we're not quite to the concept that was in the charrette that someone that has no familiarity with a building should be able to go pull a building permit, because lenders still want to see that it won't fall down, and insurance companies want to know that it was built safely. So we moved we moved past the red tape, well into the pink zone. Didn't quite push as far as Andres suggested.
Thank you. Another question up here in front.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Arter. I live in the Canyon Lakes area of Kennewick,
And your address, please?
4004 South Irby Street. And I'm wondering if there will be paths for bicycling, walking, and jogging. I didn't see any consideration. I'm wondering if that's part of the design.
Well, I would just say that bicycling and jogging and walking are important elements of this whole plan. Larry, do you want to talk about the bicycle and how we're handling that? And
Yes, many in the room might be familiar with the concept of the complete streets, which is an effort to bring not only vehicular lanes, but bicycle lanes and then places for pedestrians. Vista Field, all of the sidewalks throughout are 12-foot minimum in width. The travel lanes the speed is intended to be 20 miles an hour or less. So we've gone one step further than the idea of complete streets where you segregate the 35-mile-an-hour lane right next to the 15-mile-an-hour bicycle lane next to the sidewalk. Bikes are out on the street with the cars, but you're not having to try to compete and get up to 25 or 30 miles an hour. Everything is slow moving, and that's that step beyond the segregated lanes. And some of the things that allow this to happen are the curves in the roadway, stop signs throughout the site, the simple little design element of a very tight radius on the curve doesn't allow the car to zip around the corner at 25 miles an hour. Very tight radiuses. Think of downtown Kennewick and how fast do the cars move from stoplight to stoplight. The bikes are right there sharing on the street. There are pedestrian, the Vooners are the ribbons that run through the whole site that run. This isn't beyond the paved street that would be a city right-of-way. This shared residential street with almost a cobblestone type feel. This is that pedestrian bicycle route, primary bicycle route through the entire site. And the overall development, we're looking at making some connections, working with the city back through Edison to make the connections back through Columbia Park and then tie into that 23-mile loop trail. So a little different than a 160-acre residential neighborhood where they put a few bike paths on the forgotten lands in back. we're pulling the bikes right into the middle of the project along with the pedestrians, and the cars better slow down to be looking for the bikes as opposed to the biker taking the cyclists, got to use the right term, right? The biker sounds like Harley. So the cyclists don't have to risk trying to get across the street. It's the design is that all modes are welcome, but all modes need to move slow through the area.
Another question? Okay, we have a microphone right there. Okay.
Hello, my name is Kathleen Conaway. I'm at 2540 Prestwick Drive in Richland, Washington. And I have a couple questions in regard to the residential areas. Will this be like homeowners association type of housing, living, where you have maintenance fees, and how much privacy? I mean, are the houses really close together, or do you have some division between them? I'm interested in those type of.
Yeah, there will be a homeowners association, and the houses are close to each other. Larry, you want to sort of address how close is close?
Maybe Larry should just stay there.
Yeah, don't get too comfortable, Larry.
First off, we'll say Vista Field may not be for all. Those that want 5 acres in Badger Canyon or the large lots, and I'm up here preaching new urbanism, and I live on a cul-de-sac, strike one. I have what's called a snout house. The garage sticks way out in front of the house, and I own 5 vehicles. So, but I'm hopefully moving soon. The proximity, some of these we're talking 0 lot line. Some of these are, the design is, your house is almost an L shape. One side of your house maybe has no windows or openings, as that's the public space for your neighbors. So although they're close together, your neighbor's not looking right out the window into your space. But this is obviously, this is not for all. This is thought, the intent is to bring something else to the marketplace, as there are endless opportunities in the community for 7,200 to 10,000 square foot lots in the standard subdivision are those that want something different. So close together, maximum lot size for a single family home is 5,000 square feet. So that was something that was put in the ordinance, and that was intentional. So someone wouldn't buy 4 or 5 lots, and we default right back to that model that we have. So this is intentionally different.
Another question?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Devin Diaz. I live at 5143 Owl Court in West Richland. I wanted to thank the port for their vision for pushing what we define as residential and commercial in the Tri-Cities. I think all of the people in the room should applaud the port for their leadership. Yeah, I see Ginger doing this. So I have 2 questions. The first is the pragmatic question, which is timeline. What does the port see in terms of timeline in getting this, or turning this vision into reality? And then the second question is related to the visual arts. You've done a great job in public art down at Clover Island and the new wine village. But what are the plans for public art? And then what are also your plans for visual art, specifically an art gallery? And I ask that question as president of Drew Boy Creative, which is a gallery in the city of Richland. Thank you.
Thank you. Just I would address in part from the commission standpoint, the commission did set up an arts policy. I think we're probably the only local government that actually has a percent for art. So as we sell properties, monies will be dedicated specifically to art. So I can specifically address that, yes, money is going to be set aside for art. Later in the program, I think we're going to specifically talk about timelines. I don't know if we're ready to talk about timelines at this point. But if anybody from staff either wants to talk about timelines or a little bit about our arts program, you could step right to the mic, sir.
Sure, if you'd like. I was going to talk about it a little bit later, but since the question came up now, time frame. and then I'll talk a little bit more about arts. The time frame of this project is a little bit challenging. I don't want to sound like I'm, waffling here, but after tonight, we will confer with the Port Commission, and then we'll take the box of plans, the engineered drawings, and then we formally give those to the city for comment. And I know that we've already done some of that, so we're kind of running a parallel path. But it's hard for me to say this is exactly going to be our time frame, because out of respect to the city, you have to give them the plans, and you can't say, gee, Chief Hohenberg, can you go tell everybody I need them back in 10 days? You have to give the city a chance to look at this and review it and give us any comments they might have. So without having a crystal ball, I'll tell you what our intentions are, is to get everything finalized, turn it over to the city, hear their comments, and like they say, the Port Commission has told me to keep my foot on the gas. What I'd like to think, without any, major problems coming along, which I don't anticipate, this is a project that we would like to bid this fall. We've learned through the process of bidding a lot of major projects at the port, you have two windows. You try to get your plans out on the street in wintertime, when the construction companies are hungry and they're looking for that job to take them through the summer. You don't want to bid things around here in the summer because most people are working. So we're going to hit that second window, and we're going to try to get the plans out on the street, as they say, this fall. September, October, early November would be a great opportunity to get the plans out there. And then with that schedule, we would anticipate that the construction of the things that we put out there, the backbone infrastructure, would be done by July of 19. Okay, so let me back up a second and talk about what we're going to bid. You go to the one slide that just kind of shows the infrastructure. What we're going to bid out is what we call the backbone infrastructure. You're going to see the main street. You're going to see a couple of the Wooners, the little small streets. You'll see all of the utilities. You'll see the street trees, the landscaping, the water feature. You'll see the light standards and things like that. And then that will enable the port to work with the private sector, where we can work with folks like Christine and others and builders and say, hey, we've got some great parcels for residential, and we also have some great parcels for mixed use. So that's really going to be the end game of getting the bare land that we can, go put out there to the community, the private sector. So that's really our plan. I'll wind myself back up and say, provided that there aren't any major pitfalls, we're going to put this thing out on the street this fall. So it's going to get real. It's kind of like on the airplane. I just flew, and the flight is great, but when it lands and everybody stops, it gets real, because then, the nice people that were by you, then they're all elbows going up to get their bags. So this is my analogy. It's about to get real, okay? Arts. Devin, we have a long history of working together. I appreciate what you and many others in this community do. I appreciate that this community embraces the arts. When I first moved here 21 years ago, I would have never thought that this was a great arts community, but it is. So Commissioner Moak talked about the process that we have in place, where we're going to bankroll some things for the arts. But if we come in with some good bids, and if we can do all of this stuff, and if there's a little bit extra left over, we could potentially consider an art object right up front. Okay, so we do have a soft spot in our heart for the arts. Go look at Clover Island. Look at some of the cool stuff there. One of the best things that our community is going to see is a little bit later in May. We're going to be unveiling the Latino mural project out at the Wine Village. So this is a great arts community, and I appreciate the fact that this question was brought up. And I know the Port Commission thinks this is very, very important. So I don't know, did I do a fairly good job with your question?
Sajay. I'm one of the officers of the Green Party of the Mid-Columbia. I live at 5826 West Medellin Avenue, which is a stone's throw away from here. I will be able to walk to this. In one of the earlier plans, there was a community center in addition to the Performing Arts Center. There was a community center that was proposed. Is that still in the cards?
I don't recall there was a community center specifically programmed here. Outside of the art center, was there? I'm not.
Might you be thinking about the Link project?
No. This was It was, I think, in one of the, it was in one of the early charrette. So I take that as a no.
Yeah, that right now, that is a no, but,
In the land use matrix, the overall build-out, there's, I think, listed about 30,000 square feet of what would be considered community space, something sprinkled through the site. There's not a particular space identified for that, and community space, that includes churches would be included in that listing, and that might evolve into a community space of whether that's service for the young, the elderly, or any variety of population. So that was identified as one of the uses in the area, but not a particular building of here's where the community center will be. So it is in the matrix, it's in the master plan that says there will be some community space, just as it lists residential and apartment and commercial and the Performing Arts Center, and even a little bit of R&D. It also references community or neighborhood service community space.
My next questions would be, are there provisions made for bicycle parking and for EV recharging?
Larry, you're up.
I'll just stay up for these. The electrical vehicle charging, we're actually putting, we have our design folks from Meyer who's helping us on the next project at Columbia Drive. Is our first building going in that's going to have 2 vehicle charging stations and throughout Vista Field. Yes, we'd like to say we're leading on doing this. The state energy codes are now requiring that electrical vehicle charging spaces be added in with projects. There are various triggers, building size, but throughout this area, the idea is to include in strategic locations electric vehicle charging, and in the bicycle parking throughout. That's also something that I would point to our Clover Island examples of. We get fairly interesting when it comes to bike rack, and we're starting to think. We're working with David Spalding. He brings a lot of interesting ideas that might be more than just putting the bike rack up. Some of these corral concepts that are that you see down at universities. The idea to help encourage the bicycle beyond just there's a bike rack out in front of the restaurant.
Okay. The two last things. One is a comment on that one is more of a personal preference. I tend to prefer modern architecture styles, and I tend to think that the proliferation of stucco around here is a bit repetitive and inorganic, and I'm just stating my views that I would prefer. Like the rendering for the Vista Art Center is something that I like a great deal, and that's if I were to be dictator of this, that's what I would go with. But that would have to just be subject to just putting my view in there. The last question I have was if the principles of new urbanism are going to be applied in future aspects of city planning in the Tri-Cities. And that's the last question.
Well, if I was dictator of the community, it's like this is, as it was said during the charrette, this is to decant the ideas, to bring them to the community, and the interest that is starting to grow with Vista Field, and it was exemplified when the city established the urban mixed-use zoning for the Kennewick waterfront area. There were some existing uses that car dealers said, I know I'm a car dealer, but I'd also like that urban mixed-use designation, and I believe there are some folks in other parts of the community asking or inquiring about, will this also work for, can I get that urban mixed-use designation? So it is, the idea is sprouted. Happy that the port played a role in bringing this idea to the forefront of the community, but it is starting to grow. And if I had a microphone, I'd suggest maybe the city planning and community development director might be able to speak to that. But the idea does seem to be growing. And again, this isn't something to be forced on. It makes economic sense. The cities are starting to see this and encouraging this, and we're starting to hear more of this talk of what's happening or proposed in Richland along the Parkway. And so these ideas are brewing, besides getting excited about the next chain restaurant coming to town, and now we're getting excited about placemaking.
Thank you, and I do appreciate the questions, and I appreciate the question related to the architecture And as stated earlier, this is conceptual. And when I was looking at some of the new urbanist communities outside of Denver, and I had gone there on my own to sort of look at some of those, we see a mix of the very much traditional look like you would see in these renderings and modernist look. And I don't think the intent is to preclude developers from choosing different types of styles and that meet the kind of criteria and the atmosphere that we're looking at. But very clearly, we're not trying to dictate it has to be colonial or it has to look like it's Tuscan or anything else. So we've got some other questions here. I know we've got one over here.
We have one
Oh, we
here in the
got-
back.
We're going to take one in the back, but everybody's going to be able to get their question answered, and we're going to try to maneuver through everything. Proceed. Sir, would you state your name and address for the record?
Jose Chavallo, 5927 West Quinault. I have a question. I like seeing Larry jump up and down, so this might go to Larry. One thing, it's a good plan if we can stick to it. My question is, you say we're going to have 5,000 square foot lots. Is there anything in there where someone can't come in, buy 4 or 5 lots and put one big building? Are you going to have a protection in there? No, I like the smaller lots. I'm just saying, is there going to be a protection? So someone just don't come in and buy a big chunk?
In the zoning ordinance, not just what we would sell, but the city zoning ordinance, and this is the only district that I'm aware of, most all their other districts focus on minimum lot size. You must have at least X number of square feet. This is one where they would not be able to issue a permit if you had over 5,000 square feet for a single-family dwelling. We might sell 10 or 12,000 square feet to someone, but that means the permit that they take needs to be for 3 or 4 units on that property or something commercial in nature. So that was purposely put in the regulations so they can't do an end run and simply buy 4 or 5 lots. And we end up unintentionally defaulting back to that slide that had the homes on the bottom, where by the smaller lot size, maximum lot size, which is the only district that I'm aware of. Is that correct? It's the only one where you have a maximum lot size for the residential. That was the intended mechanism tool to assure the concern you brought up doesn't occur.
Okay.
Yes, it's Vic Epperly. I live at 8930 West Canyon Place in Kennewick. Questions has to do kind of with, I think I heard that main street would be dedicated city road right-of-way, and that basically all these other side streets are in essence on the private side.
There are
Or-
both public and private streets there.
So with the private streets, who's going to be maintaining those?
Larry, would you want to talk about,
We're working through the details on now. There's a new ordinance or a new state law. Was it the community? We were just talking about this thing.
I call it chow.
Yeah, it's the chow. What is it? It bundles the condo regulations statewide and the homeowners association that it would effectively applies for a mixed-use project like this. Is the HOA rules are written for a creekstone, and they don't do well with when there's a commercial use in, and the condo works for both residential condos and commercial, and it's a common interest ownership act, which is this state has adopted. Many other states have this model. The private alleys and the private residential wooners and some of the landscaping in and around would be maintained through this few dollars collected, again, as what happens in many of these other HOA type organizations for plowing of the snow, sweeping of the street, and also building a few dollars up for repair and maintenance of those roadways, as they are not dedicated rights of way that become city responsibility, but didn't want to just create them and leave them for the homeowners to figure out what happens in 15 years when there's a pothole. That is the mechanism that we're looking to utilize for Vista Field, and again, establishing that before there are any land sales, so that's that predictability. People know what they're buying into. One of the things that makes this affordable, instead of having 4 homes to split the cost on plowing 200 feet of street, you now have 14 people to split that cost, as we're talking about smaller lot sizes. So there are more people, there's less to maintain per lot or per space, and there are more people to split those costs amongst. That is the model.
How about the long river water stream feature there?
That is also something that the city would be allowing, but that is, to me, that'll be a cost that will be borne and shared by eventually the 103-acre overall development to assure that when the pump breaks, it doesn't simply get turned off and become flowers are planted in that space. Those are the long-term, the perpetual maintenance of that. Those that invest and buy into the vision are also part of those that help assure the vision is retained. So if that is it's one of those, when we hear loud and clear in this community, if you want something, rather than expecting the government to maintain that, that's not, the city has made that clear. That's not a responsibility that falls back to them. And another way to look at this, we're not going to be telling the people that live in Creekstone or Canyon Lakes or any other part of town, you're going to be funding that water feature. Those that live in this area, the businesses in this area will be covering that cost, not putting these significant improvements in and then saddling the entire city of Kennewick with those maintenance costs.
We have another comment.
Well, I can
Go
do
ahead.
this one. So
Please state your name and
I'm
address for
Ginger
the record.
Wireman. I live in Richland,
you-
2435 Michael Avenue. And Woonerf, which Larry and I think Tim have both referred to, is, how's that spelled? Woonerf. So if you're trying, it's Woonerf, Woonerf. And if you look it up, you'll get a better understanding. But basically, by designing it like this, those alleys end up replacing the driveways, and you would be responsible for repairs and maintenance of your own driveway in your own neighborhood. So it basically just exchanges the driveway for a shared thing, a shared feature. And I would encourage all of you to see if you can get the book Suburban. If you didn't participate in the charrettes and you didn't get to hear Andres Duany, there's a book called Suburban Nation that is a really great exploration of a lot of this. And there's another book that talks about this new urbanism called Happy City. And I really recommend that to everybody because it talks a lot about how these types of places, the gathering places, they're not covered meeting rooms. So it's not a community center in that sense. But because it's so user-friendly, people know their neighbors, they're out on the street, the kids can play, the kids can walk to school. There's not a school on this site yet, but Vista School is pretty close. Could the street be redesigned to make it safe for the kids to walk to Vista? Probably. So Happy City, Suburban Nation, and Woonerf.
Another over here.
Hello, my name is Ryan Bailey. I'm here with my son, Romeo. I have a quick question about, address. 3213 Luna Drive in Pasco, Washington. Yeah, Washington, of course. Many of us travel out of the Tri-Cities for excitement as far as Seattle, Portland, things of that nature. Is this kind of a city that never sleeps kind of feel? Is that what you guys are looking for here? Can you come at any time of the day or night and have some kind of family fun or event? Or is it something that's primarily for the residents that live within the living zone?
Well, I've been interested myself, I think, in that 24-hour entertainment, and I think there's going to be some of each. But I don't think initially you will find that this is 24-hour community that never sleeps. But I think that it could develop into that. I don't know, Larry, from the perspective of the planner.
Again, the concept behind new urbanism, the sidewalks don't roll up at 5 o'clock when the stores close. Including the residences in the overall neighborhood leaves a reason for the businesses, the restaurants to stay open longer, and residences generate the activity and that vibrancy. And at present, probably not the most happening place at 3 in the morning. I don't know that too many Tri-Citians are up at that time. But this is, and I got to be careful using the phrase, this is the city center that we're looking to build. If there was any activity going on in the community that was positive, it would be in Vista Field, where a Court Street shuts down when the restaurants close at 11 o'clock, or the mall shuts down at 9 or 10 when they close. part of the reason it was so important to have these main streets through the site being public is they're not a location where it's now 10 o'clock and the homeowners association folks come and run someone off. The water feature is open 24 hours a day. The streets to walk up and down and stroll, and the park spaces would be open, not controlled and shut down as a mall is done or a private property move folks along. And that was something that was crucial that we heard from DPZ. These need to be public spaces, not something, well, if you buy food from the restaurant, you can be out front. Yes, there are some tables that will be for a restaurant that need to respect that those that have bought a meal have the space, but in and around the water feature, the street furniture throughout the area, this is that public place that doesn't close. So if you want to help it be vibrant, we have some sales folks that might talk to you later, and your business, and part of this is the focus of, this isn't, the port's laying the backbone. This is up to the private sector to make those investments, to decide to be open till midnight or 1 o'clock and stretch the wings a little bit rather than shutting down. Anybody know someone from Brucci's? They get tired that they shut down at 7:45. So we got to change that mentality that we have the opportunity, but also the business community needs to respond and push their hours a little bit later.
But also, I think one thing is, here, it looks like this is all in isolation. We're out in the middle of a field. We're part of the vibrant center of the Tri-Cities, where the Toyota Center, the Convention Center, the retail hub of the Tri-Cities, the restaurant hub of the Tri-Cities is really half a mile away. So as we look at this, and that's why we think this new urbanism and this urban community here at Vista Field matters, is because of where it's located in proximity to a lot of the existing hospitality, retail, residential areas. Were you?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one other thing. Ryan, is it? We're building this for your son. Seriously, if we're looking at this and saying, I'm building it for me, I'm 57, we've missed the whole concept. And that's one thing that Andreas of DPZ reminds us all the time, is that we don't look at the ideas that are currently in vogue. We need to get out in front of this. And Andreas has been a big fan of us talking to the kids, talking to high school students, talking to kids even younger than that, because the fact of the matter is, look around the room. We're building it for folks like this young man, and part of that is that these folks expect vibrancy. And one thing we don't want to see is our kids have to go to Seattle or Boise and stay there. So we're building it for folks like your son.
Make a little comment. Make a comment.
All right, Commissioner Barnes.
Thank you. In my mind, the basic premise for Vista Field is, and you've heard this term used, it's live, work, play. I think historically our society became accustomed to working in one area, and then you come home, and so the vacant parking lot is around the office building after 5 p.m. and it stays vacant until the next morning at 8 a.m. Well, in Vista Field, it will be urban mixed use, live, work, play, all in one area. So you'll make better use of the resources, better use of the spaces that are there, because the people will live there, work there, and play there. Thanks.
Okay.
Anna Boyle, most people know me as Dee, and I live at 1909 West 2nd Avenue in Kennewick. And I have a question about, we've referenced that the port is providing like the structure and the bones for this vibrant community to start, which is awesome. But is there some sort of system or plan or strategy that will be implemented to kind of screen and make sure that we're getting the right vibrant businesses in here?
Collaborative development.
Yes.
Who's talking about collaborative development? Because we actually have worked very assiduously to come up with a plan that's different than anything else that's been going on in terms of that specific way of working with developers.
Just want to back up for a second. The Port Commission are the folks that are flying at 30,000 feet. Okay, they're not supposed to know the details of how wide the water feature is, and I'm from Southern Oregon, it's a creek, okay? But The Port Commission has made a lot of the very important decisions, such as it will be a new urbanist project. Another very important decision was that they wanted to have a process by which developers, builders, folks could come in and everybody could get an equal shot of, kind of knowing when the project is ready to talk to the private sector. We have this collaborative design process that the Port Commission spent quite a bit of time working on, and it is already in place. They had it essentially a year or two before we need it, but it's a good policy. Let me describe it for you briefly. I reread it today. It's a process where the Port Commission, when they have some property that's ready to go, so let's say after July of next year, we get everything in and we have some residential dirt over on this side, and we maybe have some mixed-use dirt on the other side. The Port Commission wants to be fair and make sure that everybody, within the region, or however wide of a net you want to cast, has an opportunity to respond with a concept or an idea. So we're not just going to go out and say the dirt is X amount and anybody that can pay the price gets a shot at it. We're going to be pretty selective. And I want to kind of be upfront with the community about that, because it's not necessarily about money. That's what the Port Commission said. It's about the vibrancy. It's about the project. So specifically what we're going to see, let's just take a hypothetical where we have a builder that wants to pick up 4 lots on the residential side, and they tell us all these great things about what they're going to build. What we're going to do is we're going to sit down with them, with a representative from the DPZ team, with Larry and myself, and we're going to pre-screen this, and we're going to talk to the builder, and we're going to see some renderings of what they propose to build. So before we bring an idea to the Port Commission, it's going to kind of have some meat to the bones. And the Port Commission will be rather selective. They will make sure that the proposal is very consistent with the master plan. So we're going to get a chance to kind of road test the concept before we just go sell some property. And if it's a courtyard home, 4 of them, they have to be very consistent with this.
Right. And thank you. I guess too, beyond infrastructure, like the building set, and I'm thinking more commercially than residential. So the businesses and industries that will be able to take those spaces, that commercial space, will there be some sort of guidelines of who we want, or maybe there's a board or some sort of group that's just going to make sure that the businesses and the industry and the commercial end, the tenants that will be there, fit the goal of this community?
Well, I guess I would say there's your board right here, the 3 elected officials. And again, talking about them at the 30,000 foot level, it's great when we at the staff level talk about the light poles or the landscaping. These 3 here are entrusted with they're the gatekeepers, so to speak. Okay, and they will be reviewing these proposals. And we hope to have a process in place where there's predictability. Predictability for the private sector, predictability for the Port Commission, but these 3 right here are the ultimate board. They're the board of directors that's going to say yes or no to a project, but they're going to do it after they've had input from staff and the DPZ folks to advise them. But these guys are the ultimate gatekeepers on this project, and they do know this new urbanism plan, backwards and forwards, so they're going to have the final say.
One thing I'd like to say is we purposely stayed out of this process and let the community come up with what they wanted to. And Tim is absolutely correct. We are the gatekeepers. I think we're extremely committed to do exactly what the community said they wanted. That's what the master plan reflects, and that's what we're going to defend. There's been opportunities along the way to sell the property to a developer where the port could have made a substantial amount of money on it, but we didn't want to do that. We want to protect this for the community, give them exactly what they wanted any way that we can, whether it's through policies that we already have or policies we're going to create. But our goal and our commitment is to do what the community wanted. So we'll protect this any way we can.
But there will be a tenant mix, and some of them will be things like attorneys or architects, and some will be more dynamic and exciting, so.
My name is Lori Matson. I live at 8812 West Fifth Avenue. I'm also the president and CEO of the Tri-City Regional Chamber, one of the partners here in this building. And I don't really have a question. I just wanted to make a comment. I just wanted to commend the port for the process that they've gone through, the thoughtful process that you've gone through. A few years ago, the partners in this building did a regional branding study, and some of the results of that were the community wanted a performing arts center, they wanted walkability, they wanted a town center, locally owned businesses, and while you were in the middle of this process already, I feel like the port really took that study to heart. A lot of the things you've been doing since then really are laddering up to what the community said with that as well. So I think there's just so much opportunity. I hadn't seen this till tonight either, and I just think for small businesses, the people that want to live there, this to me is just a huge opportunity for our community. So I commend the port, the commissioners, and your staff for all your work.
Hi, my name is Vonnie Ashleman. I live at 100426 Canyon View Drive in Kennewick. And I have a couple questions. My first question is whether or not there's going to be an outdoor pavilion of sorts for summer concerts or summer theater. And my other question is, when will the community be offered the opportunity for pre-sale on a home in the village?
I'd say certainly within this first phase, that outdoor pavilion or area is not contemplated. Larry, you would respond to how that might, in the future, play out, and also when she's ready to buy, and how soon are you ready to sell?
All right, not to contradict my boss's boss, and it depends on how formal you're talking about the outdoor concert location. From the beginning, the pop-up retail near the 3 hangars, one of the opportunities with that sea of asphalt we have, it's also a place, that is a location for some concert activity. Water feature, 4 or 5 food trucks in and around the area, and this could be a site for a small stage. If we're talking 1,500 seats, if we want to clone the Maryhill Amphitheater, this isn't the place. If you want to talk 300-400 people out on a Friday night.
She wants Woodstock, I think.
We have the site and we have the fence, so if we can make that work. But so it's a question of, does a stage for a activity outside, utilizing some of the bathroom facilities right here in these buildings, next to the food trucks, next to the water feature, does that meet the outdoor activity of the outdoor concert you're looking for? As we work towards build out, the concept that was identified in the charrette were actually 2 pavilions in the park area. The specific use wasn't spoken for. And again, when you see park, don't have this read as a sea of grass. Maybe, but it may also be hardscape with the band, the group performing and drawing, again, that vibrancy. We've come to learn that it's not just about the horizontal improvements, the road, the water, the sewer, or even the architectural control on the vertical. It's also the programming of the spaces. You have nice looking buildings, but without all the people, without the activity, you have nice man-made improvements, but the place becomes the vibrancy that gets interjected. And so in the public park, there are 2 pavilions that are identified. So if you're thinking 1,500 seats in formal facility, no. 800 seats indoors? Sure, the Performing Arts Center folks. But the activity from day one, 300-400 people gathering around, getting some food, maybe even a beverage from one of these facilities, and bringing some life back to, vibrancy back to Vista Field, yes.
And how about
Well, they've kept me out of the timing because the discussion, because I sometimes get into the weeds, and for all the realtors in the room, it is illegal to sell or offer for sale a lot from an unrecorded plat. So of course we wouldn't do such a thing. But there is a. I'll be candid, and my boss Tim will maybe kick me later. The day after we open the bids and know that the contractors, which are incredibly busy in this community and the price of oil is going up, but the day after we open these bids and we know we can afford all these improvements we're talking about, we can get very serious about what is the time frame that the roads will be completed and when would the lots be ready, as we would like to see the sequence. As soon as the lots are created, the roads are completed and the legal lots are created through the City of Kennewick Planning Department, we're ready to close on some land sales and have some building go vertical, private sector make the investment and go vertical. So the time frame, the real trigger is the day the commission awards the bid to the low contractor, knowing that the project's in budget, hopefully later this fall, is the time when we can really get serious about specific on what lot. The other thing is we need to get those bids before we can do the finalization on pricing. Is we need to know all of our costs on input before we can then price the product.
Another question or comment? Have one up here up front.
My name is Bobby Wilson. My address is 920 South Fifth in Pasco. In all of this, I just thank you. This is exciting and this is fabulous, and I appreciate all the work. The original charrettes were exciting, and I just appreciate what you've done since then. So in all of my enthusiasm of what this can be, what I'm finding some anxiety about is I'm living there, and I want to walk out barefoot on the pavement that's still warm from the day and hang out with my neighbor, and there's not lights and there's not cars going through the area. Where's the quiet? Where's the dark? Where's the rest in work, play, recreator? I forgot the trio.
I'm not sure Bobby, I understood the question.
It sounds busy. Where is the respite and quiet in the midst of this mixed useness? When you live there, you want to sit quietly on your porch. Your car's going to be driving past all the time.
They're going to be driving very slowly past, I would say that. And when you look at the courtyards, you look at the open space that's there, there's a lot of opportunity for quiet as well as for activity. Yeah.
This is not the street where at any point in time, that's the only way to get to someone's home. In the middle of the night, someone's racing down the roadway. This is that street where you're out on your front porch with your cup of coffee and the neighbors coming by, and then frequently a vehicle comes by. This gentleman comes by on his bicycle. See, and folks are walking up and down the street. Yes, a car can come onto this location, but this is where you're stepping off your front porch, talking to your neighbor across the street, and the alley is the location where the people coming to and from their homes are pulling into their various garage spaces. This is that quiet space, but it is challenging to have the vibrancy and the activity of this urban center and also have this quiet place. That's the idea behind the shared residential street, as you can have both. The activity levels are different. Main Street has more activity. The residential street is this quiet, sleepy, shared street, and the alleys are where the vehicles on a regular basis are moving up and down, coming to and from the homes.
Commissioner Barnes.
Of small pocket parks interspersed throughout the development, rather than having one large park, say a central park, if you will, but pocket park concept is what we've discussed, is what DPZ introduced to us as a concept. And
there are multiple smaller pocket parks identified throughout the site, one being over by what would be the extension of Quay Street and the road. This is the building that we're in right here. There's a pocket park identified in the northeastern portion of the site. There are small segments of green throughout these residential vooners. This is even called out behind what's a current machine shop to be the community garden. There are public lawns and yards throughout the project, and Commissioner Barnes is correct. There are smaller pocket parks throughout, thought to be more of passive recreation as we have the active recreation with Lawrence Scott Park in the immediate vicinity. So it's not just this central park, but scattered throughout the site are these quieter places. I do want to, probably should let it go there. I do want to remind, this is an urban location, so even that pocket park, this is going to have more activity with close to 1,100 residences being on this site than a sleepy little park at the end of the cul-de-sac.
Thank you. Another question or comment? Mr. Malley?
Brian Malley, 2307 France Court, Larry. I'm curious with the number of phases and the area this size, what's the expectation, not so much with dates, but how many phases to roll out in this plan?
The adopted master plan and the development agreement with the city identified 8 phases, and the concept behind the phases, they would work from the center out. We identified all of them numerically. I think it was 2, 3, 4. It bounces from side to side. The general concept being we're starting with the center phase, and we won't immediately jump to the portion up by Lawrence Scott Park and Kellogg or the southeast, and we will work from the core out. 8 phases, and the timing on the project can be anywhere from 3 to 7 years, and for build out in this first phase, we'll see what the response to the community is and be thinking differently. Not how quick can 20 acres be consumed, because that can be done pretty quick with the strip mall model. How much how much activity can be added? It's about compact development. So it's not, the measure shouldn't be how quick can you roll to that next phase and open up the next 20 acres, but how much activity, how much vibrancy can be built in that first phase. 8 phases thought to be and we'll take those down piece by piece, as we don't want to be competing, again, that trying to fill one entire area, and you don't want to open up that next phase too soon, because you see that happen where you open the subdivision up and you see mini homes constructed, and then you leapfrog to that next piece and that infill. We're mindful of opening up the next phase when it's ready, and I'll leave I guess I'll leave the financing out of this. The idea is that our initial investment here is utilized for the funding of those next phases, and the speed of development in here will be the trigger, not only time and demand, but also dollar-wise for opening up that next phase.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Chief?
Just a quick comment. And I know that's hard for me, Mr. Moak, before you say anything, but City Manager Marie Mosley is gone on some well-deserved personal travel tonight with her husband, but I know exactly what she would say. First of all, she would say thank you to the 3 commissioners. The port commissioners have done a wonderful job. And I can tell you, Davin talked about the leadership and vision, and he snuck out of the room here, but you also have a proven track record. Recently, between out at Clover Island, where many of you know that I jog personally, and down along Columbia Drive with the Urban Wine Village, there's a lot of trust. And there's a lot of trust between our elected officials and certainly city staff. And I've had the opportunity to work with both Tim and Larry, along with the city manager, Greg, and other folks from city staff. We're very, very excited, very, very supported. So I want to say thank you to each of the 3 of you up there for the great work that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. You know, it certainly goes both ways. When our DPZ architect group, when they see how far we have gone in the last 5 years, well, it's only because the city of Kennewick and the Port of Kennewick and the community have worked well together in order to get this far, because we're writing new chapters. We are changing the code. We are doing just about everything different than what has happened, not only in Kennewick, but in the Tri-Cities over the last 60, 70 years. And to do that takes people working together. We see a planning commissioner here, Mr. Torelli. I mean, this is a lot of different people at a lot of different levels working together. So we have another question.
My name is Marla Bosley at 1006 North Nevada Street, good old Fountain Hills, and I would vote for the stucco. And my question is, I see a lot of hardscape, and I'm curious if, and I noticed one pond, but is the Babbling Brook going to be the runoff area, or is it going to be self-contained and a pretty Babbling Brook? And is the retention pond, is that pond going to be like more of like the pond down at the main park here, or is it going to be more of a retention pond, something that is going to be hidden?
Larry, can you talk a little bit about our water features and in the use of water throughout the project?
Yes, the water feature through the site, it is a self-contained. This isn't storm drainage, so when it rains, boy, it's really flowing, and the rest of the time we're celebrating as a dry creek. This is continuous. We're even chlorinating the water because we're including multiple steps down into the site, and we were coached from the water design folks, if you're going to allow and then specifically encourage folks in the water, need to make sure that if they touch the water, there's not an issue with it. There will be kids splashing and playing in this. So that is a self-contained circulating water feature, and it even has a provision put in. The concept that came from the Vista Arts folks was an idea of an art walk. So when developed, there's also ability for a small ribbon of water crossing the site in front of the Vista Arts Center and back into this pond. This pond, think of this as this is not the storm drainage retention pond with the steep slopes and the chain link fence. This is that urban pond that's in the park. I can't think of a good example here. The duck pond at Columbia Drive or Columbia Park is not the example for this pond. The picture that you see of the pond in the movie when they show you something in Central Park with the hard edge next to it, think of that as the pond that we'll have for the tail end of the water feature.
Another question? I think right now we're done with questions. I think that Nick, you wanted to talk a little bit, this is our CFO, Nick Koiker, about some of the financing aspects of the project and the money and moving forward on that. So
Larry, you want to take this for me?
Then there might be more questions.
So just a quick show of hands, how many people here want to see everything they see on these easels and not have their taxes increase? That'd be me, right? I'd be one of them. So anyways, I'll come back to that in a sec, but for the last couple of years, we've been discussing the process for Vista Field. We've used kind of a door theory. We've had 3 doors. The first one's a master plan. We've closed that door. We've approved a master plan. Door number 2 was biddable documents. We're probably about 80% on those. Door number 3 is the financing plan, and this is obviously, we can't open door number 3 till we are closed door number 2. That's where I kind of step in and decide how we're going to pay for this. Actually, it's the commissioner's job, but I'll just recommend to them. Basically, this project, what you see up here, is going to cost between $5 to $7 million in phase 1. That's a very broad number. I'm sure people are thinking that's kind of a very broad range, but at this point, where we're at in planning, that's kind of where we've had some issues with bids coming in higher than we expected. The building climate is incredibly hot right now, so we're at this point we're just taking really broad swacks at it because we'd rather over plan for $7 million and then have it come in at less than that if we can. So anyways, so what we plan to do is get a $5 million loan. It's a private bank loan. The great news, going back to my original question, is we're pledging our current tax revenues. So right now our levy rate's 33 cents per thousand. That means if you have a $200,000 house, you're basically paying $66 a year to the port. We have the ability to levy up to 44 cents per thousand statutorily, but we are pretty determined, I think, to not increase that. Especially in this day and age, I mean, the McCleary decision, me personally, I've seen my property tax bills go up substantially this year, the state portion. So the port's levy, with this financing plan, will stay the same. We'll stay at 33 cents, and actually, potentially we could go down, because what happens is every year, new construction gets built and the levy base grows from there. So really, we could basically do all this and your taxes will stay the same or even go down, which would be great news for, I think, everybody in this room. And then the balance, whatever the balance is between 5 and 7 million that we'd come up with, we'll budget for that in our next budgeting process. We have a couple ideas of how to pay for that difference. The $5 million loan is probably pretty conservative on our part. When I first ran the numbers for financing, our debt capacity was $30 million, which basically means we could go by statute and get a $30 million loan, but we've avoided that because we didn't want to put the public in debt for the next 20 years and didn't want to make payments on this for 20 years, too bad. So, and today we don't have any debt, we're totally debt free. And then phase 2 and future phases, like Larry mentioned, we're gonna use a pay-as-you-go approach. So basically what that means is that we're kind of like building the kitty of money, basically. We're just gonna pay off our debt as quick as we can. And then we're gonna grow our funds up through land sales and leases and things like that. And then we can start redeveloping phase 2 and 3 and 4, whatever it is, moving forward. So for us, we found that sustainable, and we don't want to burden the taxpayers with a whole bunch of payments for the next period of time. So I think I'll invite Tim up. I think
Well, there's not a whole lot to say after what Nick just said. I really appreciate having him take a very close look at this. He's been spending a lot of time with this behind the scenes. It is a little bit challenging when I go to Nick and I say, I need some money, but I'm not sure exactly how much because we really haven't got the bids yet. So that's kind of where we're looking at that $5 to $7 million number. But again, that's one of the things that I want to be very cautious on, because those of you that are in the lending community or the building community here, you've seen some projects that really have, it's hard to gauge them, especially now when everybody's working, but we're hoping that we can get it within that range. So in summary, we're going to go out and borrow $5 million, just like most everybody in this room has done. You have to, when you need some money, when you want to add onto your home or you want to buy another home, you go talk to your local banker and you work out the terms, you do the math, and you see how much can I pay on this mortgage. We're doing the same thing. So we're looking to borrow $5 million. We've been very conservative with the fact that we can pay it back, and we're probably going to pay it back early, okay? Because one thing we heard from the public loud and clear was pay as you go. Port, why don't you do what we all have to do with our families? You either got to tighten your belt a little bit, or you got to work that extra job to get the payment. So we're going to do what the public told us, pay as you go. The other thing, I think Nick said it 3 times, no new taxes. And when Nick said, gee, would you like to have all of this stuff and not have to pay more for it? Did you see me? I raised my hand because I live in the Port District. I live in Rancho Reata, and I'm probably going to stay there for a lot of years. This is a great project, but I like living where I'm living. When I look at my tax bill, I say, you know what? I think I'm getting pretty good value. But I'm going to look at my tax bill after this Vista Field project, and like Nick says, it's going to stay the same or go lower. That was a concept that the commission heard loud and clear from the public. So we've never thought that we would waver from that. So the good news is we're going to do what you folks have to do, borrow money and make sure we can pay it back. So we've also had great support from the city of Kennewick. Benton County is looking at, is there a way that they can help us with this? So what we've done is we've kind of done, like the community groups do, is we go knock on some doors. We've looked for some partners, and things really look like they're going to be paying off. So it's a project of about $5 to $7 million, we hope. And again, it's something that is going to be, within the guardrails on the budget. We're not leveraging your future as taxpayers of the Port District to make this project go. The thing I would say personally, when you go back to the one slide that shows what you get for the 5 to 7 million, gotta be honest, it's bare bones. But I like the next slide that you go to that shows the private sector coming in. And if we had 20 million, we could do maybe more with it, but the concept of lean and the concept of government doing kind of a small amount and then having the private sector come in, I think it's great that we're living within our means. We think that 5 to 7 pretty much is all we can get for this project. So you're starting phase one pretty lean, and we're going to have the private sector come in and do that next slide where you see all the cool stuff coming in. So, you know, I appreciate Nick's his proposal to you here. It's what the commission has told us from day one, and they learned it from you guys. You know, live within our means, pay as you go, no new taxes.
Any further questions of folks out there at this point? Then we're going to let the commissioners have their say a little bit if they have anything to say, and I think then that'll wrap it up tonight. So, Commissioner Novakovic?
I'd just like to say something about what Tim talked about as no new taxes. When I came on the commission, I was asking about, you know, what's going on with taxes? How do we raise money and what happens? And I want you to know that you own the Port of Kennewick. It belongs to you. We're just here doing what you want us to do. What I found was over the last probably 12 to 15 years, the levy rate at the Port of Kennewick actually has gone down for home ownership. Your equity, what you own in the Port of Kennewick, actually tripled. Now that's a pretty amazing feat, and I think that that just bodes well for the fact that when we're talking about that we can handle this debt, we know how we're going to handle it, and we're not going to raise taxes. We have a history of doing that. So we're going to keep our word, we're going to listen to you, we're going to pay as we go and not raise taxes.
Commissioner Barnes.
Thank you. I'm very excited to have finally reached this point in the Vista Field redevelopment. I said to someone earlier tonight that we met as a commission in this room on April 17th of 2013, just a little over 5 years ago, where the room was packed and we made a very difficult decision to close and redevelop this airport. And during the 5 years since that decision was made, we have listened to our citizens, and we have listened very closely to our world-renowned professionals, DPZ. This is an ambitious project, and I don't think there's enough experience at this table, personal experience at this table, and personal experience at the staff level, no disrespect. This is an ambitious project, a big project, and I think we need professional help to get through it, and I think DPZ has provided that. And so I'm very excited that we've reached this point, and I'm very excited and optimistic about working with the private sector going forward. You know, the port will hang the skeleton, the basic infrastructure, as Larry has described, and then we will turn to a process working with the private sector, which means that land will be conveyed to developers and builders and even owners, I suppose, and then that land and the improvements constructed on that land will then be on the tax rolls. They will no longer be owned by the port. And so I'm really excited about the impact that this could have in our community. Lori Matson, the head of the regional chamber, mentioned earlier about the study, the Roger Brooks study that was done, I think 6 or 7 years ago, a study commissioned by TRIDEC, the regional chamber, and Visit Tri-Cities, to look at what could be done in the Tri-Cities to make this a better place to live. And the Brooks study said there are 3 major deficiencies in the Tri-Cities. We lack an urban center, we lack culture or the arts, and we lack small business that are small business organic to the Tri-Cities that started here, grew up here, and remained here. And I think that if Vista Field is done well, it will address all of the 3 major deficiencies that were identified in the Roger Brooks study. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your input and your encouragement. And I guess, stay tuned.
I think all three of us have been wanting to get to a point where we could break ground and start the construction phase. It's not come too soon, but we didn't want to just do it to break ground, or because somebody was up for an election or somebody else was up for an election, or that we were going to do it not based upon the principles that the public, you, set out for us 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, or 3 years ago. And so it's been somewhat a long road, but at the same time, it was based upon what the community needed and what you have asked for. And I think as we move forward, it's not going to be, everything's not going to be up there in the next year or two. And, I may not see the promised land, but it will be there. And it will be there for a lot of folks who are going to come after us. We hope to be able to, as a port, to shepherd one of the greatest developments in the history of the Tri-Cities. And I'm honored to be here as a port commissioner, honored to have the colleagues that I have who have worked together with our staff and our community to bring this project. But we need you to continue to hold us true to the vision, to continue to ask the tough questions and make sure that we have that livable, bikeable, walkable community of vibrancy that you've asked for. Don't let us backslide. This is your project, and as commissioners, we're pleased to be able to shepherd that project. Appreciate all of you being here tonight. If you didn't get cookies or whatever is back, if there's anything back there, please do that. And I certainly appreciate all the work by our staff here, and especially Larry, who answered all the tough questions. But stay tuned. We'll be breaking ground later this year, God willing, and we look forward to having you all there. Have a good evening. And we are adjourned.